Have you ever walked into a perfectly calm room and immediately felt your chest tighten for no apparent reason, or found yourself scanning faces at social gatherings, searching for signs of disapproval that aren't there? Maybe you've noticed how you apologize for things that don't need apologies, or how you freeze when someone raises their voice, even playfully. If these experiences feel familiar, you might be carrying something invisible yet profound, something Carl Jung called the unlived life of childhood security that never was. Today, we're diving deep into one of psychology's most overlooked territories, the lasting imprint of growing up in homes where safety wasn't just absent, it was actively threatened by unpredictability, emotional chaos, or the suffocating weight of unspoken rules. This isn't about obvious abuse or neglect, though those certainly qualify. This is about the subtler, more pervasive form of childhood insecurity that shapes millions of adults who look perfectly functional on the outside while battling invisible storms within. What we're exploring goes far beyond surface-level self-help. We're examining how an insecure childhood literally rewires your brain's threat detection system, how it creates what Jung termed autonomous complexes that hijack your adult responses, and most importantly, how recognizing these patterns becomes the first step toward reclaiming the secure base you never had. Make sure to engage with this content because what you're about to discover could fundamentally shift how you understand your own behavioral patterns and emotional responses. The research is staggering. According to attachment theory studies, nearly 40% of adults display insecure attachment patterns directly linked to childhood experiences of inconsistent caregiving, emotional unavailability, or chaotic home environments. But here's what those studies don't capture: the daily lived experience of adults who learned to read micro-expressions like survival manuals, who developed an uncanny ability to sense tension before it erupts, who became masters at making themselves small to avoid triggering the next emotional storm. Carl Jung understood something revolutionary about human development that mainstream psychology is only now catching up to. He recognized that childhood doesn't just influence personality, it creates what he called archetypal patterns that operate from the unconscious, driving adult behavior in ways we rarely recognize. When a child grows up in an environment where love feels conditional, where emotional safety is inconsistent, or where the adults themselves are struggling with unresolved trauma, the child's psyche adapts by creating protective mechanisms that become deeply embedded psychological structures. These structures don't disappear when you turn 18. They don't magically resolve when you move out or get therapy or achieve success in other areas of life. Instead, they become part of your operating system, influencing how you perceive relationships, how you respond to stress, how you define safety, and how you navigate the complex terrain of adult emotional life. The brilliant yet tragic irony is that the very adaptations that helped you survive childhood often become the barriers that prevent you from thriving as an adult. But here's where hope enters the story. Jung also discovered that these unconscious patterns, once brought into conscious awareness, can be transformed. The same psyche that created protective mechanisms in childhood possesses an inherent drive toward wholeness, toward what he called individuation. This means that understanding your personal history of insecurity isn't about remaining trapped in victim narratives or endlessly analyzing your past. It's about recognizing how your brilliant young mind adapted to impossible circumstances, and then consciously choosing to create the security you never received. The journey we're taking together in this exploration will reveal why certain adult behaviors that seem irrational or self-defeating actually make perfect sense when viewed through the lens of childhood adaptation. We'll uncover how your nervous system learned to interpret the world through threat detection rather than opportunity seeking, how your relationship patterns mirror the attachment dynamics you witnessed as a child, and how your internal dialogue often echoes the critical voices that shaped your early environment. Most importantly, we'll discover that healing doesn't require you to forget your past or pretend it didn't shape you. Instead, it invites you to become the secure, consistent, emotionally available adult that your younger self desperately needed. This isn't just psychological theory. It's a practical roadmap for creating internal safety in a world that often feels unpredictable and threatening. The atmosphere of an insecure childhood home has a particular quality that's difficult to describe but impossible to forget. It's the feeling of walking on eggshells that never break but never stop cracking underfoot. It's the hypervigilance that develops when you never know which version of a parent will walk through the door, the angry one, the distant one, the overwhelmed one, or occasionally, confusingly, the loving one. Children in these environments become emotional meteorologists, constantly reading atmospheric pressure, trying to predict and prevent the next storm. Jung wrote extensively about the collective unconscious, but he also recognized that each family system creates its own unconscious field of shared emotions, unspoken rules, and inherited trauma patterns. When parents are struggling with their own unresolved childhood wounds, financial stress, mental health challenges, or relationship conflicts, the home becomes saturated with anxiety, unpredictability, and emotional intensity that children absorb like sponges. The child's developing brain faces an impossible task in these environments. Neural pathways are forming rapidly, creating templates for how relationships work, what love feels like, and whether the world is fundamentally safe or dangerous. When caregivers are inconsistent, when emotional needs are met sometimes but ignored other times, when punishment feels arbitrary, or when affection comes with strings attached, the child's nervous system learns to prioritize survival over growth, vigilance over trust, control over vulnerability. What emerges from this adaptive process is what attachment researchers call an insecure attachment style, but Jung's framework provides a deeper understanding. He saw these adaptations as the formation of psychological complexes, autonomous parts of the psyche that develop their own emotional charge and behavioral patterns. The hypervigilant complex that scans for danger even in safe situations. The people-pleasing complex that sacrifices authentic expression for approval. The emotional shutdown complex that numbs feelings to avoid overwhelming pain. These complexes aren't pathological in the clinical sense. They're intelligent responses to impossible circumstances. A child who learns to become invisible when adults are fighting is demonstrating remarkable emotional intelligence. A child who becomes hyper-responsible to prevent family chaos is showing incredible strength and resourcefulness. A child who learns to read emotional cues with microscopic precision is developing skills that might serve them well in certain adult contexts. The challenge arises when these survival strategies become so deeply embedded that they operate automatically in adult situations where they're no longer necessary or helpful. The hypervigilant adult who can't relax even in loving relationships. The people-pleaser who has lost touch with their own needs and desires. The emotionally shut-down adult who struggles to access their feelings even when safe connection is available. Research in developmental neuroscience shows that children who grow up in chronically stressful environments develop what's called toxic stress response, where the body's alarm systems remain activated long after the danger has passed. This isn't just psychological, it's physiological. The stress hormone cortisol literally shapes brain development, prioritizing survival circuits over the neural pathways associated with calm reflection, secure attachment, and emotional regulation. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's groundbreaking work on trauma demonstrates that the body keeps the score of childhood experiences, storing them not just in memory, but in muscle tension, breathing patterns, immune system functioning, and sleep cycles. Adults who grew up in insecure homes often report unexplained physical symptoms, chronic fatigue, autoimmune conditions, or hypersensitivity to sensory input. These aren't separate from their childhood experiences. They're direct consequences of a nervous system that learned to stay perpetually alert to potential threats. Jung understood this mind-body connection intuitively, recognizing that psychological healing required attention to both conscious insights and unconscious somatic patterns. He developed active imagination techniques, partly because he recognized that purely intellectual understanding wasn't sufficient to transform deeply embedded survival responses. The body had to experience safety, not just think about it. Consider Maria, a successful marketing executive who sought therapy for what she called inexplicable anxiety attacks. On the surface, her life looked enviable: thriving career, stable relationship, financial security, supportive friends. Yet she found herself waking at 3 in the morning with heart palpitations, constantly checking her phone for signs that something was going wrong, unable to enjoy achievements because she was already worrying about the next potential failure. Through exploring her childhood, Maria discovered that she had grown up in a home where her father's mood swings determined the family's emotional climate. One day he might be playful and affectionate, the next day withdrawn and critical. Her mother coped by becoming hypervigilant herself, constantly monitoring his emotional state and adjusting the family's behavior accordingly. Maria learned that survival meant perfect performance, reading adults' emotional states accurately, and never letting her guard down because calm could shatter without warning. As an adult, Maria's nervous system continued operating from this template. Success didn't bring relief. It brought increased anxiety about losing what she'd gained. Relationships didn't provide comfort. They created additional variables to monitor and control. Even positive feedback triggered worry about whether she could maintain that level of performance. Her childhood adaptation of hypervigilance had become a prison, keeping her trapped in survival mode even when thriving was possible. Jung would say that Maria had developed what he called a false self, a personality structure built around others' expectations rather than authentic self-expression. The brilliant child who learned to anticipate and prevent family chaos had become an adult who couldn't access her own desires, needs, or natural rhythms. Her true self remained hidden in what Jung termed the shadow, waiting for permission to emerge. This pattern repeats across millions of adult lives in countless variations. The perfectionist who learned that mistakes brought withdrawal of love. The chronic caretaker who discovered that managing others' emotions was the only way to maintain connection. The emotional shutdown individual who found that feelings were dangerous luxuries in a chaotic household. The hyper-independent person who learned that needing others led to disappointment or manipulation. Each of these adaptations made perfect sense in their original context. They represent the incredible resilience and creativity of young minds, finding ways to survive emotionally impossible situations. The tragedy isn't that children develop these strategies, it's that they often carry them into adult relationships where different possibilities exist, where vulnerability might actually increase rather than decrease safety, where authentic expression could deepen rather than threaten connection. The transformation begins when adults start recognizing these patterns, not as character flaws or personal failures, but as evidence of their remarkable capacity for adaptation and survival. Jung believed that every complex, no matter how problematic in its current manifestation, contained valuable energy and wisdom that could be integrated rather than eliminated. The hypervigilant person who learns to channel their sensitivity into intuitive understanding. The people pleaser who discovers how to use their attunement skills in service of mutual relationships rather than one-sided caretaking. Understanding your particular constellation of childhood adaptations isn't about blame or endless analysis of the past. It's about recognizing the incredible intelligence you demonstrated in learning to navigate an environment that couldn't provide consistent safety, and then consciously choosing to create different conditions in your adult life. It's about honoring the child who survived while making space for the adult who can now thrive. The nervous system that developed in an insecure childhood home operates from fundamentally different assumptions about reality than one that formed in consistent safety. While some children learn to relax into trust, to expect that their needs will be met, to view relationships as sources of comfort and growth, others learn that vigilance is the price of survival, that needs are burdens others can't handle, that relationships are complex negotiations where letting your guard down invites disappointment or harm. This isn't simply a matter of negative thinking or pessimistic outlook. It's neurobiological architecture, built through thousands of repeated experiences, that taught the developing brain how to interpret and respond to interpersonal cues. When a child's attempts at connection are met with inconsistency, overwhelm, rejection, or emotional chaos, neural pathways strengthen around threat detection rather than attachment seeking. The brain literally rewires itself to prioritize safety over connection, control over vulnerability, independence over interdependence. Dr. Alan Shaw's research on attachment neuroscience demonstrates that the right brain, which develops primarily through emotional attunement with caregivers, becomes either securely organized or defensively organized, depending on early relational experiences. Children who receive consistent, attuned responses develop what he calls affect regulation, the ability to experience emotions fully while returning to baseline calmness. Children who experience inconsistent or overwhelming responses develop various defensive strategies, that protect them from emotional flooding but also limit their capacity for intimate connection. These early adaptations create what Jung recognized as autonomous psychological complexes, parts of the psyche that operate independently of conscious control. The anxiety complex that floods the system with worry, even in objectively safe situations. The shame complex that interprets neutral interactions through a lens of personal inadequacy. The hyper-control complex that tries to manage every variable to prevent unpredictable outcomes. Jung observed that these complexes possess their own emotional charge, their own behavioral patterns, and their own internal logic. They're not simply thoughts or habits that can be changed through willpower or positive thinking. They're psychic entities with deep roots in survival experience, and they require respectful engagement rather than forceful elimination. Trying to overcome a complex through sheer determination often strengthens its grip because resistance activates the very survival energy the complex was designed to protect. Consider David, a talented software engineer who found himself unable to maintain romantic relationships despite desperately wanting lasting partnership. Every relationship followed the same pattern: intense initial connection, growing closeness, then sudden withdrawal when his partner tried to deepen intimacy. David would find reasons to create distance, picking fights about minor issues, working excessive hours, or simply becoming emotionally unavailable until his partner eventually ended the relationship. Through therapy, David discovered that intimacy triggered a complex rooted in his childhood experience of emotional engulfment. His mother, struggling with her own anxiety and depression, had used David as her primary emotional support system. She would share adult worries with him, seek comfort for her relationship problems, and become upset when he tried to establish age-appropriate boundaries. Love in David's young mind became associated with losing himself, with being consumed by another person's emotional needs, with having his own developing identity subsumed into someone else's psychological world. As an adult, David's nervous system interpreted deepening intimacy as a threat to his autonomy and selfhood. The closer someone got, the more his withdrawal complex activated, creating behaviors designed to re-establish emotional distance and protect his psychological boundaries. This wasn't conscious choice or character flaw. It was an intelligent protective mechanism responding to unconscious threat perception. Jung would recognize David's pattern as what he called enantiodromia, the psyche's tendency to swing toward the opposite when one position becomes too extreme. Having experienced love as engulfment in childhood, David's psyche swung toward isolation as an adult, choosing loneliness over the risk of losing himself again. The healing didn't come through forcing himself to be more intimate or criticizing his withdrawal patterns. Instead, it emerged through understanding the wisdom of his protective mechanisms while consciously creating new experiences of intimacy that honored both connection and autonomy. The somatic dimension of insecure attachment patterns cannot be overlooked. Adults who grew up in unpredictable environments often report chronic muscle tension, particularly in the neck, shoulders, and jaw areas where we literally brace against perceived threats. They may have digestive issues that reflect the body's chronic stress response. Sleep disturbances are common because the nervous system never fully shifts into the restorative parasympathetic state necessary for deep rest. Dr. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory explains how the autonomic nervous system develops different defensive strategies based on early relational experiences. The social engagement system, which allows for calm connection and communication, requires a foundation of safety to develop properly. When that safety is absent, the nervous system defaults to more primitive defensive strategies: sympathetic activation, fight or flight, or parasympathetic shutdown, freeze or collapse. Adults who grew up in insecure homes often find themselves involuntarily accessing these defensive states even in safe adult relationships. The breath becomes a particularly revealing indicator of nervous system organization. People with secure attachment typically breathe deeply and rhythmically, allowing their nervous system to naturally regulate through respiratory patterns. Those with insecure attachment often exhibit shallow chest breathing, breath holding, or irregular respiratory patterns that reflect chronic muscle tension and hypervigilance. Learning to breathe deeply and regularly becomes not just a relaxation technique, but a way of literally rewiring nervous system responses. Jung's concept of individuation, the psychological process of becoming whole and authentic, takes on special significance for adults healing from insecure childhoods. Individuation requires differentiating from unconscious family patterns, developing a strong sense of self, and learning to navigate relationships from choice rather than compulsion. For those who grew up adapting to others' needs for survival, this process involves discovering their own authentic desires, preferences, and boundaries, often for the first time. The healing journey doesn't follow a linear path from dysfunction to health. Instead, it spirals through layers of awareness, integration, and growth. Someone might develop insight into their attachment patterns, make significant progress in relationships, then find themselves reverting to old protective strategies when facing new stressors. Jung understood this as natural, recognizing that psychological growth occurs through cycles of expansion and contraction, conscious integration, and unconscious regression. The key insight is that setbacks aren't failures. They're information about which aspects of the psyche still need attention and integration. Each time someone notices themselves falling into an old pattern, they have an opportunity to respond with curiosity rather than self-criticism, asking what this response is trying to protect and how they can honor that protective intent while choosing more conscious responses. Recovery from insecure attachment isn't about becoming a different person or eliminating all traces of childhood adaptation. It's about expanding your range of responses, developing what psychologists call earned security through conscious relationship choices, therapeutic healing, and deliberate practices that create internal safety. The hypervigilant person learns to use their sensitivity as a gift while also cultivating relaxation. The people pleaser discovers how to maintain their natural empathy while honoring their own needs. The emotionally withdrawn individual finds ways to stay connected to their feelings while maintaining healthy boundaries. One of the most profound aspects of healing from childhood insecurity involves learning to become the secure attachment figure for your own inner child. This isn't metaphorical or overly psychological. It's a practical rewiring process where you literally provide your nervous system with the consistent, attuned, nurturing responses it needed but didn't receive. Through mindful self-talk, somatic practices, consistent self-care, and patient attention to your own emotional needs, you gradually convince your survival-oriented nervous system that safety is available, that you can be trusted to provide what you need, that relationships can enhance rather than threaten your well-being. Jung emphasized that this process requires what he called holding the tension of opposites. For adults healing from insecure childhoods, this means holding both the reality of past harm and the possibility of present healing, both the wisdom of protective strategies and the courage to risk vulnerability, both honoring your adaptive intelligence and choosing conscious growth. This tension isn't comfortable, but it's generative, creating the psychological space where transformation becomes possible. The ripple effects of childhood insecurity extend far beyond personal relationships into every domain of adult functioning. Career choices often reflect unconscious attempts to create the security that was missing in childhood, leading some toward hyperachievement and others toward underachievement, both serving different protective functions. Creative expression may be either inhibited by fear of exposure or compulsively pursued as a way of processing unresolved emotions. Even seemingly neutral activities like home decoration, social media use, or daily routines can carry unconscious patterns rooted in early attempts to create predictability and control. Financial relationships frequently mirror childhood insecurity patterns. Some adults become compulsive savers, creating material buffers against the emotional instability they experienced as children. Others struggle with spending boundaries, unconsciously trying to fill emotional voids through material acquisition. Still others develop complex relationships with money that reflect their early learned associations between resources and power, love and conditions, security and performance. Jung recognized that money, like all archetypal symbols, carries deep psychological meaning that varies based on personal and cultural associations. For someone who grew up watching parents fight about finances, money might represent conflict and instability. For someone whose worth was measured by their contributions to family financial survival, earning might feel compulsive and joyless. Understanding these unconscious associations allows for more conscious financial choices that serve actual security rather than unconscious reenactment of childhood dynamics. The realm of friendship presents particular challenges for adults who learn to navigate relationships through survival strategies rather than authentic connection. Many report feeling like they're performing friendship rather than experiencing it, constantly monitoring whether they're being too much or too little, whether they're meeting others' expectations, whether the relationship will last or inevitably disappoint. The capacity for mutual reciprocal friendship requires a level of self-worth and trust that may have been compromised by early experiences of conditional love or emotional chaos. Parenting becomes especially complex for adults healing from their own insecure childhoods. The desire to provide their children with the security they never received can create intense pressure to be perfect parents, leading to anxiety, hypervigilance, or emotional overwhelm when challenges arise. Alternatively, some parents unconsciously recreate familiar dynamics from their own childhood, not out of malice, but because those patterns feel normal and predictable, even when they're harmful. Jung's insight about the unlived life of the parents affecting their children becomes particularly relevant here. Parents who never resolve their own attachment wounds may unconsciously burden their children with needs for emotional caretaking, approval-seeking, or anxiety management. Breaking these generational patterns requires conscious awareness of how childhood insecurity might be unconsciously transmitted, along with deliberate efforts to heal personal wounds, rather than expecting children to fill emotional gaps. The process of conscious parenting, while healing from one's own childhood insecurity, involves learning to differentiate between your child's actual needs and your own triggered responses, developing capacity to stay calm when your child's emotions activate your own unresolved feelings, and creating family dynamics based on security and attunement rather than survival and adaptation. This work benefits not only your children, but continues your own healing process, as parenting inevitably activates every unresolved aspect of your own childhood experience. Physical health often bears the long-term consequences of childhood nervous system adaptations. Chronic stress response patterns established in insecure homes can contribute to inflammation, autoimmune conditions, digestive problems, sleep disorders, and various other health challenges that have clear connections to nervous system dysregulation. Adults who grew up in unpredictable environments may also struggle with consistent self-care, having learned to prioritize others' needs over their own physical well-being. The body's wisdom in storing childhood experiences extends beyond stress-related illness into patterns of tension, posture, breathing, and sensory processing. Many adults discover that healing their attachment wounds requires attention to somatic patterns, working with massage therapists, movement practitioners, or somatic experiencing therapists who understand how trauma and insecurity get held in physical structures. Jung himself was interested in the body's role in psychological healing, recognizing that the psyche and soma were fundamentally interconnected. Spiritual development takes unique forms for adults who grew up in insecure homes. Some reject organized religion or spiritual practices associated with their childhood, particularly if faith was used as a control mechanism or if religious communities failed to provide emotional safety. Others become intensely spiritual as a way of accessing the unconditional love and acceptance that was missing in their family relationships. Still others struggle with spiritual concepts like surrender, trust, or divine love, because these require a capacity for healthy dependence that their childhood experience compromised. Jung's approach to spirituality emphasized direct personal experience over institutional doctrine, recognizing that authentic spiritual development required integration of shadow material and healing of personal wounds. For adults with insecure attachment histories, spiritual practice often becomes part of the healing journey, providing access to experiences of unconditional acceptance, transcendent perspective, and connection to something larger than personal survival concerns. The journey toward what psychologists call earned security involves consciously creating the relational experiences that support nervous system healing and authentic self-development. This might include therapeutic relationships that provide consistent attunement and acceptance, friendships that model healthy boundaries and mutual support, romantic partnerships that honor both intimacy and autonomy, or community connections that offer belonging without requiring performance or compliance. Earned security doesn't erase the effects of childhood insecurity, but it creates new neural pathways and psychological structures that expand options for responding to relationships and stressors. Someone with earned security can access both their adaptive intelligence developed through early challenges and their capacity for trust and vulnerability developed through healing relationships. They become what Jung called twice-born, carrying both the wisdom of their wounds and the possibility of their wholeness. The therapeutic process for adults healing from childhood insecurity often involves what Jung called analysis of the transference, examining how childhood relationship patterns get unconsciously recreated in the therapeutic relationship. A client who learned to please adults for survival might initially try to be the perfect patient, while someone who learned that emotional needs were burdens might struggle to ask for therapeutic support. These patterns aren't obstacles to healing, they're the very material through which healing occurs, as the therapeutic relationship provides opportunities to experience different outcomes to familiar dynamics. Jung emphasized that effective therapy required the therapist to be personally analyzed and committed to their own ongoing psychological development. For clients healing from childhood insecurity, this means working with therapists who understand attachment dynamics, not just intellectually but experientially, who can remain calm and present when clients' protective strategies activate, and who can model the kind of secure relationship that supports rather than threatens authentic self-expression. The integration of childhood insecurity patterns involves what Jung called making the unconscious conscious, bringing automatic responses into awareness where they can be examined and consciously modified. This doesn't mean eliminating protective strategies that still serve useful functions, but rather expanding the menu of options available in any given situation. Someone might choose to use their hypervigilance in situations where caution is genuinely warranted, while learning to relax that vigilance in safe relationships. Practical integration work often involves developing what therapists call dual awareness, the capacity to simultaneously notice when childhood patterns activate while remaining connected to present moment reality. This allows for responses that honor both the protective wisdom of survival strategies and the growth possibilities available in current relationships. Instead of being hijacked by unconscious patterns, individuals learn to work collaboratively with their protective parts while making conscious choices about how to engage with others. The ultimate goal isn't to become someone who never experienced childhood insecurity, but rather to become someone who can hold their history with compassion while creating new possibilities for connection, creativity, and authentic self-expression. Jung believed that our greatest wounds, when properly integrated, become our greatest sources of wisdom and compassion. Adults who heal from childhood insecurity often develop remarkable capacity for empathy, intuitive understanding of others' emotional experiences, and deep appreciation for the complexity and resilience of the human psyche. This healing work extends beyond personal benefit into service to others and contribution to collective healing. Adults who have consciously worked with their own attachment wounds often become natural healers, teachers, parents, or community leaders who can recognize and support others struggling with similar challenges. They understand both the protective intelligence of survival strategies and the transformative possibility of earned security, making them uniquely qualified to guide others through similar territory. The journey from childhood insecurity toward adult wholeness requires tremendous courage, patience, and self-compassion. It involves grieving what never was while celebrating what became possible through your adaptive intelligence. It means honoring the child who found ways to survive impossible circumstances while nurturing the adult who can now create different conditions. Most importantly, it recognizes that healing doesn't require perfection or complete freedom from old patterns, but rather conscious relationship with your full psychological heritage, including both your wounds and your remarkable capacity for growth, resilience, and transformation. Your childhood insecurity wasn't your fault, but your adult healing is your responsibility and your gift, both to yourself and to everyone whose life you touch. The secure base you create within yourself becomes a contribution to the collective human capacity for safe, authentic connection. Every moment of conscious choice over unconscious reactivity, every instance of self-compassion over self-criticism, every relationship choice guided by growth rather than mere survival adds to the pool of healing energy available to our species. Jung believed that individual psychological development was ultimately inseparable from collective human evolution. As more adults heal from childhood insecurity, create earned security, and model healthy relationship patterns, they contribute to breaking generational cycles of trauma and creating more secure environments for future generations. Your healing journey, however personal and private it may feel, is also a service to the larger human community. The path forward doesn't require you to forget your past or pretend your childhood adaptations never served you well. Instead, it invites you to expand beyond survival into authentic thriving, to honor your protective intelligence while embracing your capacity for growth, and to become the secure, consistent, emotionally available presence that your younger self needed and deserved. This work is both the most personal journey you'll ever take and one of the most generous gifts you can offer to a world that desperately needs more adults who understand how to create genuine safety for themselves and others. If this exploration has touched something deep within you, if you recognize yourself in these patterns of childhood adaptation and adult struggle, know that recognition itself is the beginning of transformation. You are not broken, disordered, or permanently damaged by your early experiences. You are someone who learned to navigate impossible circumstances with remarkable intelligence and creativity, and you now have the opportunity to consciously choose what serves your adult life while honoring the wisdom of your survival strategies. The secure base you never had can be built, one conscious choice at a time, one moment of self-compassion at a time, one relationship experience at a time that proves safety and authenticity can coexist. Your nervous system can learn new patterns of response. Your heart can learn to trust without losing discernment. Your mind can learn to rest without losing awareness. The adult you're becoming has access to both the wisdom earned through early challenges and the possibility of security created through conscious healing. This journey belongs to you, moves at your pace, and honors your unique constellation of strengths and vulnerabilities. There is no timeline for healing, no perfect outcome to achieve, no final destination where all insecurity dissolves forever. There is only the ongoing, spiral path of growing into ever greater authenticity, security, and capacity for both giving and receiving love. Your commitment to this growth is already changing not only your own life, but contributing to the healing of attachment wounds that have been passed down through generations. The world needs adults who understand how to create genuine security, who can model healthy boundaries while remaining open to connection, who know how to honor their own needs while also being genuinely available to others. Your healing journey, whatever stage it's currently in, is preparing you to be one of those people. Every step you take toward greater self-awareness, self-compassion, and conscious choice-making ripples out into every relationship you'll ever have, every interaction you'll share, every moment when someone else's nervous system gets to experience the safety and authenticity you've worked so hard to create within yourself.